The goofy charm of the 1960s Batman television series, starring Adam West and Burt Ward, holds a special spot in the hearts of fans across several generations. Old fans and new alike will have a chance to meet those heroes all over again in the new animated adventure, Batman: Return of the Caped Crusaders, which will remind many of a far less dark Knight while still offering some surprises. I had a chance to speak with director Rick Morales and writers Michael Jelenic and James Tucker to find out from where they drew their inspiration, any concerns they had about putting West back in the cowl, and their thoughts on ruining childhoods. Writer James Tucker on the film's origin.
I'm assuming the DVDs of the series did well, and so they decided, hey, Adam West is out there, let's do something with him new. And so they came to me and asked me if I wanted to do it. Of course, I said yes, and we met with him and made sure he was into it, and he was. And then we just started at it, it happened pretty fast.
Director Rick Morales.
And I remember sitting in there, and they were talking about this, and this was a couple years ago now, and James was, talking about how they were going to get Adam West, and I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, someone else is going to get to direct this thing. I want to direct this thing. I want to be involved in it. And it just didn't seem like that was possible. And then as it moved further along, they gave me a call, and they're like, hey, James wants you to do it. And I was like, thank God. Because, if there's any of these, DC direct-to-video things that I wanted to be involved in, it was definitely this one. Adam West was such a big influence. That show, especially when I was a kid, really made me love Batman and Robin, and kind of in a lot of ways got me into comic books and becoming a comic book fan for as long as I've been.
Well, with Adam West, Batman, I would love to do like we did with Brave and the Bold, just put that Batman in all kinds of situations. Because, again, the series was limited by, it was television, they had a limited budget, limited time. But I think, that, to me, when we did Brave and the Bold, it was like, well, what if Adam West Batman was on the moon? What if he was in underwater? It was built around that conceit of what if this version of Batman were able to do all these things and go to these different places, and that Batman would be fit in everywhere, It's not like I remember when we were doing Justice League, and the first time we had Batman in outer space, fans freaked. They were like, Batman will never get in a spaceship and go anywhere. Then that became like every other episode in Justice League. But the fan backlash to a realistic version of Batman doing those things, they had a hard time accepting it at first. And so with this Batman, I don't think anyone would question it. So it gives you liberty to tell all kinds of different stories.
Writer Michael Jelenic.
I think that's our approach to the whole project is we're doing an animated Batman, so we could really do stuff that could never have been done in the old series or, even in the comics, obviously. So how do we make this project worthy of being animated? And so we try to think of over-the-top set pieces and over-the-top, peril to put them in. So they go to space in this, for instance. So there's some ridiculous stuff in here that seems appropriate for film.
Just the ability to do much larger set pieces. We can send them to space. We can show them, walking on the space tower. We can put them in these bigger situations that, you wouldn't be able to build a set that, that was that large, or maybe do some of the action that we conceive in this. So it allows you to, broaden the scope of what you can do.
Well, I think that was always the interesting thing about the original show is it worked on two levels. When I was a kid, you did not understand any of the humor. This was serious. It's like, oh, Batman's got to stop this. It was even a little scary for some kids. And you watch it, it's like, how can anybody be scared? But, I hear people who, like the clam episode where their foot is sticking out of the clam. That was so traumatizing to, tons of kids. And you watch it, it's like, that's traumatizing. They better not watch Batman nowadays. So I think this has that, where I think there's a lot of humor. There's a lot of ridiculous humor. There's a lot of people saying ridiculous things. But I think if you're a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, you're going to watch it, and all the sort of the seriousness of the situation is going to be very, is going to be there for you. So I think it is something you can watch, with a family and work on a couple levels.
Tucker.
I hope there's enough new stuff in it to at least engage people who weren't familiar and give it a shot. And I hope there's enough homages to the original that they can feel it has credibility. To me, it feels like it straddles both lines, but you never know. I think kids of a certain bent might like it. I mean, I don't think every kid is wired to like a grim and dark thing. If that were the case, Teen Titans Go wouldn't be a huge hit. So, I mean, it's like if they can like that, I have a feeling they'll be okay with this. So, it has an irreverent tone to it as well. It'll be interesting because, again, if you're not familiar with the series, if you're not familiar with those comics, then it'd be interesting to be in a kid's head to see how do they perceive this.
Jelenic on the film's relationship to the 60s TV series.
This movie's not a recreation of the 66 series. It's more inspired by the same things that inspired that series. So we're taking stuff from the 50s and 60s comic books. I mean, because really that's what that series was. It's like taking those comics and putting them up on screen. And so we're drawing from the same inspiration and the tone and the spirit of that, and trying to create something similar. So things will be different than the series, and so like a lot of things that we love about the series is not in this. So.
In my mind, it was kind of the fun, like the lightness, the humor, like just the big, broad things that you could do with this that you wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't normally tie Batman and Robin to a giant TV dinner tray. But here it completely makes sense. That's the fun, like, scale stuff that you can do. The kind of Dick Sprang type of stuff, bringing these giant, crazy death traps and just these larger-than-life scenarios and, kind of not have to logic it out so much, How would this thing actually work, Who cares? It's, yeah.
Well, James and I mean, on Brave and the Bold, if you watch Brave and the Bold, obviously Dick Sprang is all over that, and Kirby is all over his influences. It's just the storytelling of those comics, which you don't really get anymore because we've gone to hyperrealism in comics, where everything's just is crazy over the top. So. I mean, you read any of those old comics, they're sort of ridiculous at first. You're like, this is terrible, and then you sort of get in that mind frame where, oh, wait a second, because it's terrible because I'm used to sort of hyperrealism. This is not believable, is really what you're saying, but they're fun. It's like, yeah, every element of this comic is like big, over the top, imaginative, and so when you're looking at it from that perspective. You have a whole new appreciation for that storytelling.
Tucker.
I was more looking at the original comics that spawned the show.
Sure. So
the Silver Age stuff, all the same things we looked at when we did Brave and the Bold were basically the same things we looked at for this. The 66 comic I didn't read as much because once I knew I was doing it, they were already making choices I was going to have to make, and I did not want to stumble upon the same choices. Because they did, the book had its own reason for being, and this had its own reason being. So I didn't want to mimic the comic of a series. So there was probably places where they do overlap just because we're sourcing the same thing. But
Jelenic.
Yeah, I mostly avoided them. Again, we're trying to do something that's different from what other people have done. So, we didn't want to end up like sort of their take on a 66 sort of thing. So, we mostly focused, through inspiration from like, 50, 60-year-old comics.
Morales.
Obviously with Adam West, and it's very era specific, you know, the 60s. But that show was drawing from the comic books, and we were also drawing from the comic books. I think when you watch this, you'll see, you know, the title sequence that was done, and that's really an homage to a lot of the great comic book moments throughout the years of Batman's history. Specifically, I wasn't looking at any one particular storyline of the era, but you know, just looking at a lot of the great artwork, you know, from that time that I already mentioned. Well, that's even older, but Dick Sprang and Jerry Robinson, that, you know, that goes into the very early history of Batman. But yeah, we were taken definitely from those comics of the 60s and even earlier than that.
You know, the 66 series was like Airplane before Airplane. I mean, it's a really, really funny modern comedy where you're not really aggressively trying to get laughs. I mean, you have to trust the audience knows that everybody is trying to be funny. And I think a lot of like comic book fans they watch the show or they've seen a little bit of the show and they don't understand the show as a comedy. They don't understand like these are jokes because nobody's like smiling. Nobody is, you know, like, they're just saying like every line that M. West delivers in the show is just, it's straight. Like this is very serious. And if you watch it as a kid, you take everything he says as face value. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is not being so desperate for the laughs. It's like I want to make this funny, but I can't go too far, make it too absurd. Because I work on another show. I work on Teen Titans Go, which is, you know, aggressively funny, and it's like there's no question that we're trying, you know, to get laughs. Here it's like, okay, it just has to be. You sort of, it's a lot of its juxtaposition. You have characters saying ridiculous stuff, but saying it serious. So it's definitely a different type of comedy, and it's challenging too.
Tucker, on any concerns about bringing back West as Batman?
Are you kidding? I was like, yeah, let's do it. You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, it would be great if it had happened even earlier, like, you know. But now's the time. No, I love working with him on other things. I mean, like I cast him as Thomas Wayne in Brave and the Bold, and then I cast him as the robot Batman built that sounds like his dead father. So, so you say I'm a Adam West fan. So no, it was a no-brainer. I mean, you gotta use him. I mean, he is that Batman.
You know, I don't think Adam West could ever not be the right fit for Batman. You know, he could be 120 and I would listen to him play Batman, but you know, really it was about making something with these guys. So you know, whatever they were going to give us was what we were going to build it around.
It's Adam West and Burt Ward and Julie Newmar, and you know, I got to tell you, like I've done a lot of these voice records and things like that, and you work with a lot of great actors and stuff like that, but I don't normally geek out, you know. You try to keep it professional, even though you might be geeking out. Adam West was the only one that I've asked for a picture with afterwards because I'm like, it's Adam West, I got to do it, you know. It was great honor to be able to work with, you know, these. I mean, like you said, 50 years they've been doing it. There's not a whole lot you really have to tell them. He is Batman, you know. So, and also, the three of them are, they're about the nicest people that you could ever work with. Just really, really gracious, and they read the script. They actually read the script before they came in to record it. Or at least they did a very good acting job of making us believe they had. And they seemed enthusiastic about it. So, you know, there's a lot of good energy in there.
We knew we had Adam, Burt, and Julie, and we sort of built all of this around their talents and their you know, personalities and what we wanted to see, you know, with them, you know, playing characters that they made famous once again. So, yeah, I mean, that's the only reason I did this project is to work with those guys. It's like
Tucker.
Burt and Julie are amazing. They know their characters inside and out. Burt Ward in particular, I mean, well, you'll hear, if you close your eyes, it will be like you were watching in 1966. I mean, He's great, and again, they take their job very serious. They know what these characters mean to the fans, and we had to come correct. If we had written a script that was not worthy of what they thought, they wouldn't have done it. They were very particular, and then luckily when they read it, they gave it the approval. They said this feels authentic to us, and they were happy about it. So that made us feel good.
They're all characters. I mean, Burt Ward's a character. Julie Newmar is a character. It's like, it's just it comes from an era where everybody was interesting. Nowadays people aren't interesting, but like Julie Newmar is still like, she walks in and she owns a room, and her personality is over the top, and she is she's a movie star, and that's how she still to this day portrays herself and carries herself and interacts with people as a movie star. You don't really get to see that anymore. So I mean, it's fun to interact with people from that era.
We kind of were on the page with we wanted to use the heavy hitters for this one, and if there spawns another one, we would probably dig deeper. But for this one, there's definitely homages to other villains in it, as you'll see, and but those are because of the show, Joker, Riddler, Penguin, and Catwoman are very well known. Like Riddler hadn't been in comics for almost 20 years before the TV show. I mean, the reason we love Riddler now is because of that TV show. He had been a forgotten villain up until then, so we had, those were the four we had to use that I think everyone would know who weren't familiar with anything prior to this. So, no, it wasn't a hard decision, to be honest with you. But going forward, if there's more, we'll definitely be digging deeper. So, like the 66 comic book did.
So yeah, they're definitely not. We're not trying to duplicate those performances or those voices or anything. These are, it's more inspired by the spirit of that era.
Jelenic on different approaches to Batman.
Yeah, they're very. Diedrich took the Batman character very seriously. It's like Brave and the Bold was a fun show, but Diedrich always looked at that character as super serious. He would get very emotional whenever he was playing Batman. We usually played him as a straight man in the show. Like everybody else was kind of wacky or crazy or over the top, but Diedrich always sort of, he made the stakes real because he took it seriously. I think Adam West is similar, but I think he's going a little bit more for the comedy flair than Diedrich was. It's like his performance works on both levels, but I think it's definitely a comic performance at the end of the day, which I think is sort of a subtle difference between their two takes.
Morales on surprises for viewers.
If they've never been exposed to the Adam West show, I think it's a completely different take than what they've seen in recent years. That may be good or bad depending on their feeling of how Batman should be. But in my view, there's been many incarnations of Batman, and some more successful than others, but he lends himself to nearly any situation. Tucker did Brave and the Bold, which was a great show. I did storyboards on it back in the day, and I remember there was a lot of hate for that before it came out, and people really rejected it just straight off the bat, without giving it a chance. But then I think once it aired, people realized this is really, there's a lot of love that went into this and a lot of respect for the character. They weren't, we weren't just making silly Batman. It's rooted in the comic books and the old Adam West show and things like that. And I think people learn to really like it by the time it's over. So I just feel like surprisingly, I think it's funny. I think there's some good humor for fanboys, of which I consider myself to be one. I remember reading the script, and there's my particular favorite line, dig, at the end. It just cracked me up. Hopefully, when you guys see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it involves Paris. But yeah, anyhow, I think just the nature of it to anybody that hasn't been exposed to it, should be surprising to them.
Jelenic on the future of this Batman.
Well, it has to be successful first, right? So if it's successful, they will figure out what to do from this universe. But I mean, there's tons of things, classic versions of characters I would like to see. What's the other classic? Fleischer, Superman, 77, Wonder Woman. The key is that this one sell really well, so we could hopefully get an opportunity to visit those other sort of classic versions of characters.
Morales on complaints about childhoods being ruined.
You know what? Like, as a creator, I can't bring myself to be concerned about that, because if I am, then it limits how I'm gonna approach something. I mean, on everything that I do, I try to make it the best that I can, based on what we have on the script, the producers wants, what I feel is. If you start taking all that stuff into account, everybody hates everything. There are going to be people that absolutely despise this movie. Hopefully more that love it. It's the way the world is,
Tucker.
To me, that's a badge of honor, because that means I did something that was different than what they were used to seeing hundreds of times, mainlined into their veins from birth. I'm like, okay, we can't just replicate that, but I don't think that'll be the case with this. I think it honors and homages what they knew, gives it a spin, makes it fresh for not only the people who watch, but the people who made it. I mean, Adam West appreciated that it wasn't just a retread, that it had its own reason for being. So I don't know, but I worked on Brave and the Bold. People constantly, I read that a lot at first. And then, 2 years later, they were loving it. So